Yes, here we go. A very good morning to you. Good morning. Yeah, good morning to you, Grenada, and the rest of the world. And welcome to the month of September. It is September 1st, and I'm George Grant saying thank you so much for joining us this morning, albeit late. You're going to be seeing this well after the program's been done. We got started at about 9:07 this morning because for whatever reason, and I'm not at all surprised, for whatever reason we were not able this morning to log on to Facebook as we normally do. But I decided, you know what, that's not going to stop the show. We're going to record this, do the program as best we can under these circumstances. And once I'm through with it at about high noon, we will put it up there on Facebook and also on YouTube. But just be advised that you're not going to be seeing the live stream on Grenada Broadcast either, huh? Yeah. Was it Gloria Gaynor who sang a song called I Will Survive? Da-da-da-da-da-da, I will survive. Yeah. Well, Georgie Porgy is sort of echoing that this morning. I do hope that the rest of things go fine. I do hope that you're going to get a reasonable stream. We'll see how that works. God help us. Okay, yeah. And he will, believe me, he will. He has on so many different occasions. Anyhow, let's get down to brass tacks this morning. Interesting program. I'm just sorry you're not going to be able to see it live because your comments mean so much, not just to me and the program, but boy, to the country. It's always nice to hear what you folks are thinking. Anyhow, this morning we do have the buzz, as always, and we're going to begin, as we do every Sunday morning, with the reading from the Holy Scriptures. Okay. And then, yes, Little Angel is going to be with us. She has chimed in, got that overnight, and we're going to share her contribution this week with you. As far as editorials are concerned, yeah, we do have the Grenada Advocate, which is captioned, Time to End Crisis. What's that about? You're just going to have to wait a few more minutes to find out what they're talking about. The New Today, on the other hand, is captioned, Bitter Blow for the PSC, or from the PSC. It's the Public Service Commission. Another zinger for you. Never a dull moment on the spice aisle. Never. Now, that's it for your editorials this morning. And then we move on to our interviews. And yes, interviews, because we do have two for you this morning. And neither one is live. The first one is something that we actually recorded here a little after 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, in which we asked the question, how prepared are we to deal with natural disasters? There's a young lady whom many of you could probably identify with NADMA, the National Disaster Management Agency. Her name is Samantha Dixon. Well, as you probably know, well, maybe you know, maybe you don't. She's no longer with NADMA, but she is now the president of the Grenada Red Cross Society. So, you know, she's still in this area of disaster preparedness, that type of thing. And she dropped by here yesterday afternoon. We had a wonderful little chat, probably lasted just a tad over half an hour. And I'm going to share that with you this morning. That's the first of the two interviews that you're going to be seeing today. The second one is one which we did on Friday morning. Well, it wasn't an interview per se. You know, every Friday morning, a gentleman by the name of Brian Pitt joins us on Good Day Grenada. Well, he did on Friday morning. And we discussed some very, very, very interesting matters. And I thought, this is worth sharing with the SWGG gang. So we're going to share that with you. Brian is going to talk about the recent incident down at the Gardens where press secretary issued a lecture to, to the media. He's going to talk about the contributions, the increase in contributions to the NIS. Well, I guess you can breathe a sort of sigh of relief because that's now been pushed back until, if I'm not mistaken, January of next year. Yeah. He's going to be talking about Grenlec's fight with, or the government's fight with Grenlec, because they're the ones who took the gloves off. Yeah, that issue was heard in the International Court recently, and I think it's this month. We expect to hear the outcome of that. It's going to be very interesting. Keep your pinkies crossed, because this could be a bit of a disaster. Another disaster for Grenada, especially financially. Brian also talked about parents and students depending on school supplies from expats. Yeah, I understand there was a function down at in Grenada recently where there's an expat who gave out an awful lot of supplies to parents and students. You'll hear Brian mention that he couldn't understand where all these people came from. Everybody was in search of handouts because of the economic conditions. A lot of parents are struggling to send their kids back to school this week. Yeah. He also talked about how the economic conditions that we're undergoing here in Grenada could affect human trafficking. Does believe that it is having an effect. People are desperate. And he also talked about the Levera development project being in jeopardy. I'm sure many of you are now aware of that. Okay, so those are the things that, some of the things that Brian talked about on Saturday, and we'll share the whole thing with you in just a wee bit, all right? Well, a little later on this morning. Our main feature, and I'm hoping that at least we are able to establish contact with him. I'm referring to Dr. Patrick Antoine, an attorney at law who pays us the occasional visit here whenever he's got something on his chest to get off. Well, the question here on the website is, or the statement is, drawing closer to recovering policyholders' funds in the BAICO CLICO scandal. Are you one of those people who lost money in this BAICO CLICO fiasco? BAICO CLICO fiasco. There's a rhyme to it. Well, apparently there's a concerted effort underway to try and recoup, if not all, at least some of your funds. Patrick's one of the people involved in that process, and we expect that he's going to be joining us not in person, but joining us by Zoom. Okay? So, that is your rundown. And like I say, I'm really happy that you decided to come back later in the day and view this program, because there's some important stuff in there. So I'm glad that you came back as we continue to fight our challenges. But notice, Georgie Porgy does so with a smile on his face, because he does know that there are better days ahead. Yaman. All right? So that's going to take care of your rundown on this Sunday morning, September 1st edition. And by the way, I don't know what it's like now. It seems like it's getting a little bit dark behind me, but this morning standing on the balcony out there and just thanking God for such a beautiful day and such a beautiful country in which I live, Grenada. Yeah, a lot of yachts anchored out there this morning. For the past few months, we haven't seen the cruise ships, but they'll be back here, I would assume, sometime in October. Yep, keep your pinkies crossed. But still, the landscape, you know, you've got the Carnage down there, you've got the fort up there, Fort George. Then you look off into the distance, you've got Grand Dance Beach, you've got Quarantine Point, you've got Point Celine, you've got Springs, you've got Belmont. Geez, so much to look at in this place. God has truly, truly, truly blessed us. We're thankful. Okay, break time, and we'll come back with the buzz.
Because your vehicle is a necessity, being roadworthy is critical. Hubbard's Motor Department introduces its new tire and battery sales and service outlet located at Building Supplies Compound in Grand Dams, close to the Sugar Mill Roundabout. Available are a wide range of competitively priced tires, maintenance-free batteries, oils and lubricants. Keeping in mind your busy schedule, this outlet is equipped to provide you with fast and reliable service. Simply drive in and you'll be delighted with your service experience. For more information, contact 440-2087. Hubbard's. Quality service. Affordable prices.
You don't know how many hurricanes will be coming this season, so you need to be prepared. At Hubbard's Hardware and Building Supply Departments and Food Fair Supermarkets, everything from canned foods, flashlights and batteries, to plywood, tarpaulin, lanterns, roof repair kits, water tanks, etc. are available. For over 90 years, we've helped you prepare for and recover from storms. Hubbard's Hardware, Food Fair Supermarkets, and the Grenadian General Insurance, an integral part of your hurricane preparedness plan.
Good morning, Grenlec meter reader.
Morning, Mr. Meterman. I'm glad I caught you. Last month, I got a very high bill, and I don't understand why.
Last month, we were not able to access your meter, so we had to estimate the bill. This will happen if we don't get an actual reading.
So, what can I do to ensure that my meter is easily accessible?
Well, you can get your licensed electrician to move your meter outside of the gate or directly in front of the house. That way, I'll have easy access and I won't have to deal with your dog.
Ah, Butch.
Yes, dogs can be a problem sometimes. On one occasion, I was attacked by a dog and police had to get involved. Customers who don't want to cage or tie their dogs should really move their meter and make it easily accessible.
Well, I'll consider that.
Thank you.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Alrighty, folks, it's now in my time here. It's about 21 minutes after 9 o'clock. And yeah, I see Ryan checked in there a little while ago on Messenger. Yeah, you guys can send me a note or two on Messenger if you so desire, Facebook Messenger. He says, missing your Sunday program. Well, I said to him, Ryan, we're doing it right now. And by the way, Ryan, I understand that there's a storm heading your way. Not a storm, a hurricane. And that little bugger has 150-mile-an-hour winds. Yikes. I think the Bahamas are going to be in for it later on today. And then it's coming up to Florida. They're still not certain, it seems like, where in Florida it's going to hit, if Florida. They're saying that there's a possibility that it may hang a right and go that way. Don't know, but one way or another, my dear friend, please stay safe. Stay safe. And by the way, having said that, don't know how many of you follow the weather closely, but there's another system that's just come off the coast of Africa. Quite frankly, again, I am no meteorologist. I am no expert. But based on what I'm seeing from the National Hurricane Center, this thing's kind of high up, and they expect that it's going to develop into something. But I really don't believe, because it's so high up, I really don't believe that we're going to have anything to worry about here in Grenada. If anything does happen, it's not going to be until the middle of the week. But you can breathe a sigh of relief thus far. All right, so let's get down to the buzz. Our opening scripture. Yes, sirree. We go nowhere without that, eh? Absolutely nowhere. Well, this morning, our first reading says, "But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert. And when you've succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Matthew chapter 23, 8 to 15. All right? That's your first reading, and just before we pull the curtain down about midday or so, we'll have another short one for you. Now, little angel says this week, pilgrims, once again, it is clear public servants in Grenada need to know and understand their roles and obligations in serving people and country in order to avoid directing comments which indicate that they don't. The recent call for media workers to display professionalism and respect in the workplace was out of order and lacked good judgment, especially as it seemed to have emerged after efforts were made to establish the marital status of a sitting prime minister. This is information which Grenadians are entitled to, but seems not to be well understood and received by some. It is an opportunity for those who are not so well informed to become acquainted with the facts surrounding private and public life. Like so many others, the media briefing, which took place on Tuesday, August 20th, reflected the abnormality within which the media operates in Grenada. Most, if not all, of the media houses and personnel are politically affiliated with one and the same party. And like some public servants, may have lost their true calling. Public reprimand in the workplace by the Prime Minister's press secretary on that Tuesday was undoubtedly an act of disrespect. Doing so in private would certainly have been an act of professionalism. The fact is, media practitioners in Grenada are deserving of a lecture, not after asking a fitting question, but for their silence on so many pertinent matters of national concern. Lecturing others can help, but there are occasions when the situation may require taking a step back and first examining oneself. It is the responsibility of all media practitioners and public officers in Grenada to be well informed about their duties and to always be prepared to exercise them and address various issues in an acceptable and effective manner. Individuals in the media can only educate others after educating themselves. Signed, guess who? Little Angel. Okie doke, okie doke, okie doke. Folks, 1, 2, 3, yes, let me take another little break here, and we'll come back. It's time to delve into this week's editorials. Hang in there.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try the sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
In our part of the world, we need to be prepared for natural disasters like storms and hurricanes, even outside of the season. I'm sure you'll agree that keeping our loved ones, homes, and businesses safe is important. So, I came up with a few quick tips to help you stay safe. First, make a family disaster plan and ensure that everyone in your household is familiar and comfortable with it. Remember to add batteries and flashlights to your emergency kit. Now, for electrical safety. Familiarize yourself with your electrical panel, as it may be necessary to switch off the power during a storm or flood. Make sure you install a transfer or isolation switch to prevent your generator feeding electricity to Grenlec's line. If trees are too close to power lines, call Grenlec at 237 for advice. By following these easy steps, you will be well on your way to being hurricane ready. Don't be caught off guard by natural disasters. Prepare now. For more information, visit Grenlec.com.
Can I have a chicken lunch, please? Large.
Real nice today.
I don't want that.
But you just asked for a chicken lunch.
I don't have problem with the lunch. Afraid the container.
What is the problem with it?
These styrofoam containers, they don't good for the environment. They shorten with life.
What foolishness you telling me? So what you want me to use?
Put my food in this.
Where you get that?
At the food fair, where you could get all biodegradable food boxes and disposable food supplies like cups, plates, anything you could think about. Name it, it's there. And they don't harm the environment. Food Fair taking the lead in cleaning up and protecting the environment. Hey, like you take me advice, you get in your biodegradable food supplies.
Well, girl, I supporting who supporting the environment. That is why I shop in that food fair.
Food Fair, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets. Products distributed by Hubbard's agency, Kirani James Boulevard.
Okie dokie, folks. Right now, let's turn to the first of our two editorials today. May have a little extra for you in just a wee bit, tell you about that. But our first comes from the Grenada Advocate, and it is captioned, "Time to End Crisis." With another month drawing to a close, it is indeed sad that no decision appears in sight for the crisis which has gripped the South American Republic of Venezuela. It has been months, or better yet, years, that the Venezuela crisis has dragged on, resulting in the people of that country continuing to face loads of problems that range from shortage of food and medicinal supplies to proper housing and other social services. At issue is whether the government of President Nicolas Maduro should remain in office, or if the self-declared president, Juan Guaido, who is favored by a number of countries, including the United States, should be allowed to take over. The talks have been taking place in Barbados by representatives of the Venezuelan government and the opposition, and up to now, there is a stalemate to these discussions. A recent BBC report said that about 4 million Venezuelans have fled the country to neighboring states in search of better living conditions and to escape the violence occasioned by the battles being waged by the opposing factors. Tensions have been mounting in the country since the start of the year, when Mr. Guaido declared himself interim president. Last year, Mr. Maduro, who was first elected president in April of 2013, was sworn in for a second 6-year term. That re-election was not recognized by the country's opposition-controlled National Assembly. Upwards of 50 countries have recognized Mr. Guaido as the president, including the United States, some European countries, and several from Latin America. Only Russia and China, as major powers, are backing the Maduro government. Barbados was chosen as a venue for talks between the two sides, government and opposition, to see whether a deal can be made after they had failed to come to an agreement in Norway. To date, that has not been the case. Earlier this month, the Maduro government threatened to pull out of the talks in Barbados after the United States had imposed sanctions freezing Venezuelan assets in America. In the meantime, Venezuelans who remain in their country continue to struggle under the weight of a collapsing economy, power blackouts, disruptions to social services, high prices, and inadequate care. From this vantage point, CARICOM, which enjoys close relations with Venezuela, has been calling for the two warring factions, government and opposition, to bring conclusion to the crisis, echoing the principle of non-involvement in the affairs of Venezuela. The CARICOM region also wants countries like the United States to desist from inflaming the situation. It is known that once this crisis continues, we in this region face the grave likelihood of the fallout from that situation. There are reports already that Venezuelans fleeing their countries have turned up in Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and some other countries as well in the Eastern Caribbean. It is important that this matter be dealt with, and decisively, by those hemispheric agencies and the United Nations, which support neither the Maduro faction nor that of Guaido. We have already seen how the Organization of American States has failed in bringing about a solution. At stake is the livelihood of Venezuelans, and that should be the interest of any one agency or agencies which want to bring conclusion to this matter. That's the editorial which appeared on Wednesday of this past week from the Grenada Advocate. All righty, folks, according to my little clocky here, I think the program started about 7 minutes late, but the real time at the moment is 20 minutes away from 10 o'clock. Remember, we're going to bring you that conversation I had with Samantha Dixon, formerly of NADMA and now the president of the Grenada Red Cross Society. We had that conversation yesterday afternoon. And then after that, boy, oh boy, Brian Pitt. Brian Pitt. You guys are really loving this character. He's turning into another AB, eh? Yeah? Always has a lot to say. Very opinionated. And he's somebody who's also very genuinely concerned about the direction in which he sees his country going. Yeah, you can understand that. Break time, pilgrims.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try their sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Because your vehicle is a necessity, being roadworthy is critical. Hubbard's Motor Department introduces its new tire and battery sales and service outlet located at Building Supplies Compound in Grandans, close to the Sugar Mill Roundabout. Available are a wide range of competitively priced tires, maintenance-free batteries, oils and lubricants. Keeping in mind your busy schedule, this outlet is equipped to provide you with fast and reliable service. Simply drive in and you'll be delighted with your service experience. For more information, contact 440-2087. Hubbard's. Quality service. Affordable prices.
Grenlec Community Partnership Initiative, supporting health.
To the individuals who will be using these vehicles to serve the people, please ensure while we are using these tools that we use these tools in a manner that we will all be proud of. To Grenlec, a long-standing partner with us, a true testament of what can happen when private and public sector work together for the benefit of the people.
Grenlec, energizing our community.
Alrighty, 18 minutes away from the hour, and on Friday of this week, just a couple of days ago, the New Today did publish, hang on a sec there, hang on a sec. They did publish an editorial, which is captioned, Bitter Blow from PSC, and that's the Public Service Commission. I quote, It is a most questionable decision taken by the Public Service Commission to appoint acting senior planner in the Planning and Research Unit of the Ministry of Education, Angela Finlay, to the important post of Chief, would you please give me a break, to the important post of Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education. The new today cannot see the appointment taking place without the prior approval and knowledge of both Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell and his Education Minister, Emmeline Peer. This newspaper calls on the members of the PSC, including its acting head, Prescott Swan, to fellow members, Madonna Harford, Delano Vivek, Ursula Antoine, and Hudson McPhail, to explain to the nation the controversial appointment at this point in time. The members of the Commission cannot hide behind confidentiality, since they are fully aware of the plethora of documents within its own domain about Finlay and her temperament on the job as an educator over the many years, especially at Wellesley College. This newspaper is aware of other matters involving the same Finlay before previous persons serving on the PSC, and the paper trail is there for the Prescott Swan Group to familiarize themselves with about the many controversies involving the new CEO. The New Today calls on Mr. Swan and company to release the report of an inquiry that was set up on their own instructions to investigate a complaint made by the said Finlay against a junior officer in the Ministry of Education, whom she alleged physically assaulted her on the job. There was not a shred of evidence from any of the eyewitnesses to the incident before female attorney-at-law Keena Marrast, who did the investigation, that the junior officer did what Finlay was alleging in a complaint to the said PSC that triggered the probe. After hearing the evidence of all the main witnesses, another attorney-at-law who served the government and people of Grenada as a Solicitor General came out openly in his cross-examination and accused Finlay of telling a blatant lie to the same PSC that the junior officer had physically assaulted her. Is the PSC appointing a liar to the post of Chief Education Officer in Grenada to help mold the minds of the future leaders of this country? What is the message being sent out by Mr. Swan and the other members of the PSC to the rest of the public service? The PSC has also got a copy of a confidential memo sent to it by former Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Finlay Jeffrey, in which he raised serious concerns about the ability and temperament of Finlay to run a small department of 6 persons within a unit of the Ministry of Education. If Finlay, based on the assessment of her own PS, cannot run that department, then how can the Prescott Swan-led PSC expect this individual to run the entire school system in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique? This is what P.S. Jeffrey told Mr. Swan and company on June 1st, 2018, about the same Finlay who 15 months later is appointed by the same PSC to the post of Chief Education Officer. 1. As supervisor of the unit, Mrs. Finley appears to have demonstrated poor judgment and leadership when, instead of reporting to me what the junior officer had told her by way of justification, she allowed herself to become embroiled in a confrontation with the junior officer. 2. The claim that the junior officer physically assaulted Mrs. Finley cannot be verified. 3. Mrs. Finley's letter asking for the Public Service Commission's intercession was premature, since I was dealing with the issue as she had asked in her letter to me, and she somehow did not see the wisdom in waiting for the outcome. 4. Mrs. Finley's decision to not occupy her room since the incident occurred, but instead sit in the waiting room and to share the workspaces of others has created great unease within the Ministry of Education, has tended to be disruptive to an observer. It can diminish the image of the Ministry of Education. Next, since the incident, Mrs. Finley has not been as productive as she could have been. Moreover, as demonstrated by her willful refusal to report at a meeting of senior officers, she appears to be belligerent and very defiant. And finally, it also appears that Mrs. Finley lacks the social skills required to adequately provide leadership to the staff of the planning unit. One should take careful note of a particular statement made about Mrs. Finley by P.S. Jeffrey, in which he touched on her, quote, willful refusal to report to a meeting of senior officers. She appears to be belligerent and very defiant, unquote. Is this what is expected of someone to run the office of the Chief Education Officer in Grenada? Was there some other reason for the appointment of Finley to the post of CEO that no one other than the PSC and the political directorate of the country might be aware of? And what makes the decision even more suspicious is the fact that the goodly lady did not even apply for the vacant position of CEO. This is why it is very imperative for Mr. Swan and company to explain to the nation the rationale for this appointment. This is good enough reason for the Minister of Education, Emmeline Peer, and the current lot at the PSC to resign for springing onto the nation an individual with such a checkered record and past in the education system. The Ministry of Education has been left in turmoil and, as one observer said, hit by a hurricane due to the PSC's decision to appoint the controversial Angela Finley as CEO above more qualified and worthy contenders. Yes, sirree. That's the editorial, which appeared in Friday's edition of the New Today. All right. So technically, that takes us to the end of our editorials for this weekend. Now, the reason why I say technically is because there's another piece that I want to share with you. I think everybody is very much aware of a little piece that I did here last Sunday responding to the lecture by the press secretary to the media at a post-cabinet briefing. Well, that has been the rage in social media this past week. And I'll tell you what, on Friday, the Media Workers Association, everybody was waiting to see whether or not the Media Workers Association would respond, and if so, when, because the president of the association happens to be an employee of the Government Information Service. Actually, those of you who watch the National Report, which we run here every weekday morning, have seen her reading the news regularly. So the public was waiting to see what would happen. And by public, I mean me as well. Well, I'll tell you what, I was delighted on Friday when I received a statement from MWAG responding to the comments made by the press secretary. I'm going to share that with you in just a wee bit. And when I do, I want you to listen carefully and decide how much muscle there is in that statement, and whether or not there will be the gumption to follow up. We'll see. So just hang in there for a wee bit.
In our part of the world, we need to be prepared for natural disasters like storms and hurricanes, even outside of the season. I'm sure you'll agree that keeping our loved ones, homes, and businesses safe is important. So, I came up with a few quick tips to help you stay safe. First, make a family disaster plan and ensure that everyone in your household is familiar and comfortable with it. Remember to add batteries and flashlights to your emergency kit. Now, for electrical safety. Familiarize yourself with your electrical panel, as it may be necessary to switch off the power during a storm or flood. Make sure you install a transfer or isolation switch to prevent your generator feeding electricity to Grenlec's line. If trees are too close to power lines, call Grenlec at 237 for advice. By following these easy steps, you will be well on your way to being hurricane ready. Don't be caught off guard by natural disasters. Prepare now. For more information, visit Grenlec.com.
You don't know how many hurricanes will be coming this season, so you need to be prepared. At Hubbard's Hardware and Building Supply departments and Food Fair supermarkets, everything from canned foods, flashlights and batteries, to plywood, tarpaulin, lanterns, roof repair kits, water tanks, etc. are available. For over 90 years, we've helped you prepare for and recover from storms. Hubbard's Hardware, Food Fair supermarkets, and the Grenadian General Insurance, an integral part of your hurricane preparedness plan.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try the sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Alrighty, folks, as promised, I'd like to share with you now the response from the Media Workers Association of Grenada to the lecture, famous lecture issued to the media at a post-cabinet briefing. I quote, "The Media Workers Association of Grenada expresses its disapproval of a statement read by Press Secretary to the Prime Minister, Mrs. Philomena Robinson, at the government's weekly post-cabinet briefing. Okay? Yeah. At the Government's Weekly Post-Cabinet Briefing on Tuesday, August 20th, MWAG views this statement as an attack on press freedom and the reputation of media workers in Grenada. There has never been an instance in the history of government's press briefings where the professionalism and integrity of media workers have been questioned. Therefore, this statement came as a surprise to the media fraternity. On Tuesday, August 27th, 2019, MWAG's acting president, Delroy Louison, contacted Ms. Robertson via telephone to schedule a meeting seeking to clarify the above-mentioned statement. She then asked him to make a formal request in writing to her office for consideration. On the said day, a letter was written, emailed, printed, and delivered to the press secretary and copied to the information minister, Senator, the Honorable Dr. Winston Garraway. To date, there has been no correspondence from the press secretary herself. Okay, this is just going to be one of those great mornings, you know. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, yeah. But you know what? We're going to make it. We're going to make it through, and we're just going to pick it up here. Yes, sirree. Hang in there, hang in there, hang in there. Hang in there, hang in there, hang in there. Bear with me. This is not your average day. Here we go. On Tuesday, August 27th, MWAG's acting president, Delroy Louison, contacted Ms. Robertson via telephone to schedule a meeting seeking clarity on the above-mentioned statement. She then asked him to make a formal request in writing to her office for consideration. On the same day, a letter was written, emailed, printed, and delivered to the press secretary and copied to the information minister, Senator, the Honorable Dr. Winston Garraway. To date, there has been no correspondence from the press secretary herself, nor the information minister. This demonstrates a lack of professionalism and respect for the Fourth Estate. The Media Workers Association of Grenada is therefore requesting a withdrawal of the statement and an apology to members of the fraternity via the same medium. If this request is not acceded to at the hosting of the next press briefing, which, by the way, is scheduled for this coming Tuesday, the association will seek an alternative measure to deal with this matter. UNESCO's Director General, Audrey Azoulay, on the occasion of World Press Freedom Day 2019, stated, and I quote, "Press freedom is the cornerstone of democratic societies. All states, all nations are strengthened by information, debate, and the exchange of opinions. At a time of growing discourse of mistrust and delegitimization of the press and journalism, it is essential that we guarantee freedom of opinion through a free exchange of ideas and information based on factual truths. MWAG holds dear its mandate of advocating the rights of media workers in the state of Grenada. Pilgrims, that one came as a surprise to me. First little surprise was that it was written by Delroy Louison, whom I had known to be the public relations officer. Well, apparently he's now been appointed as the acting president of MWAG, because apparently he penned this and actually signed it. Okay, so it's signed Delroy Louison, acting president of MWAG. Okay, makes me wonder what happened to the real president, Sherry Ann Well. Speculate if you will. I won't. I'm just giving you the facts as I got them. All right. Let's see what happens at this Tuesday's post-cabinet briefing. One, whether there is going to be a response from either Ms. Robertson or the information minister. And two, if there isn't, whether or not MWAG will stand firm by its threat. It says here, if this request is not acceded to at the hosting of the next press briefing, the association will seek alternative measures to deal with the matter. Let's see if they proceed. Okay, Pilgrims. Yeah. One heck of a morning, boy. We got off to a bad start, but at least we're here, and we're thankful for that, as always.
We are honored to partner with the Grenada Schools, Inc., the Ministry of Education, and the Caliste Government School in providing this library. GCPI program put $120,000 or 66% of the cost of the library. But it's not an investment that is intended to bring a financial return. It is an investment in the human capital of our youth in Grenada.
Grenlec has shown us their seriousness about partnership, their seriousness about education, and their seriousness about nation building. That local partnership tells our major donors that Grenada is interested.
We have got a big vision at Grenada Schools. We believe that what we can do is, through literacy, have the most literate country in the Caribbean. We are very happy that you got this gift from ourselves and from Grenlec.
We see this library as a unique and valuable resource. One of the best things about receiving this library is that it honors and recognizes the efforts and contributions of a company like Grenlec and Grenada Schools Incorporated.
Since 1994, Grenlec shareholders have invested over $22 million. This has been invested in the communities throughout Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. We hope this library will serve the students and school well for many years to come.
Can I have a chicken lunch, please? Large.
Real nice today.
I don't want that.
But you just asked for a chicken lunch.
I don't have problem with the lunch. Afraid the container.
What is the problem with it?
These styrofoam containers, they don't good for the environment. They shorten with life.
What foolishness you telling me? So what you want me to use?
Put my food in this.
Where you get that?
At the food fair, where you could get all biodegradable food boxes and disposable food supplies like cups, plates, anything you could think about. Name it, it's there. And they don't harm the environment. Food Fair, taking the lead in cleaning up and protecting the environment. Hey, like you take me advice, you get in your biodegradable food supplies.
Well, girl, I supporting who's supporting the environment. That is why I shop in at Food Fair.
Food Fair, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets. Products distributed by Hubbard's agency, James Boulevard.
Alrighty, folks, time now. It's 8 minutes after 10 o'clock, Sunday morning, September 1st. Yeah. And time now to get into the first of our two pre-recorded segments. I mentioned to you this morning that the interviews per se today were both pre-recorded. The first one you're about to hear is a conversation I had yesterday afternoon with Samantha Dixon, current president of the Grenada Red Cross Society, and Samantha was also formerly the acting disaster management coordinator with the National Disaster Management Agency. Okay, we talked about a number of things, and this piece runs for about 20 minutes or so. I want to share that with you right now. So here we go. Alrighty, folks, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Right off the bat, I have to be honest with you, as always. This program was recorded yesterday afternoon, about 3 o'clock. And the lady you're looking at is Samantha Dixon. Samantha is currently the president of the Grenada Red Cross. And also, I bet most of you would recognize the name when it's affiliated with NADMA. She was the acting disaster management coordinator with NADMA for some time. Samantha, welcome to Grenada. First time here?
First time here, and thank you for the opportunity.
So nice to finally meet you. Yeah. So nice to finally meet you. Let's start by telling our viewers a little bit about yourself, Samantha Dixon.
Yes, well, retired public service. I play a public servant. I play on that term a little bit because I gave 30 years service to the country, and I retired, and now I'm with the private sector. But while I was with the public sector, I was a teacher first, and then I went to the Red Cross on secondment for about 9 years. And then I returned to the public service. I served as a guidance counselor in the secondary school. And then I went on to national disaster management for the last 4 years of my career with the public service.
Do you like being out of do you like being where you are right now in the private sector?
So being out is different. So I can look back and see some of the things that I've done to impact lives and to keep people safe while being paid as a job to get it done. Now I volunteer. So as you rightly said, I am now the president of the Red Cross. And so that's a voluntary position. And there's an 18-member board that run the management of the Red Cross, but we have staff that do the work on the ground. And of course, volunteers, because our organization is run by the power of volunteerism. So it's different. Being in the private sector, you know, as well, time is money, so you're always on the go. But you do the job. It's less stressful based on the jobs that I've had in the public sector, but I still volunteer. I teach for the National Emergency Office. I do a lot of sessions island-wide, and once anybody call me and I'm available. No is a word that probably don't exist in my vocabulary.
You talk about teaching for the emergency office. Who are you teaching and what?
Right, so I am trained in various disciplines. One, of course, basic first aid and CPR that I do both for. I teach for about 3 organizations that I volunteer for. But more so the medical management of emergencies and mass casualty management. I am one of the instructors through the Ministry of Health and PAHO here. So whenever there's mass casualty management training, I give services. Right now, in recent months, I trained 2 of the district committees for NADMA in first aid and CPR at the community level, keeping people safe. And we have 2 communities booked again, and they're waiting on my availability to have them. And these classes are held in the night. So a working day for me starts 7 in the morning and ends 11 p.m. And that's
7
kind
to
of
11.
average. Yes, yes.
It's a good thing you're still young.
Yeah. Yes, and I had a birthday yesterday.
Well, happy birthday! I'm not going to say it, but happy birthday.
Yes, yes.
Samantha, let's get down to like they say here in local parlance, brass tacks. You know, one of the things that's been at the forefront for many of us in this country is Grenada's readiness or apparent readiness for disasters. Okay, and generally here in Grenada, when we talk about disasters, we're talking about hurricanes, but there are a lot more emergencies that we need to be prepared for. And I would imagine that with your background with NADMA and now the Red Cross, you should have a pretty darn good perspective of where we are as far as preparedness is concerned. Let me hear you.
Right. So, you know, I do not envy my colleague in the seat right now up at NADMA, because these situations are never win-win. You know, there's predictions. It's a science that we do not have all the answers to. But from having the experience I have and having recently left, we talk a lot about comprehensive disaster management. Comprehensive disaster management means that we try to adapt to all situations, all times, involving all peoples at all levels to be prepared. And it sounds a lot, but what it simply means is not about hurricanes alone. It's not about the emergency office alone. It's not about the media alone. So there's a role for every entity to be ready to manage emergencies. One thing that happened back in 2004, when we had the experiences of impact from Hurricane Ivan. At the time, I don't know if you remember, we were calling our National Emergency Office NERO, which was a relief organization. Now, disaster management have evolved over time as well, and with experiences, we tend to always aim to do things better. So it has now become a management agency, which means that we don't only offer relief, because relief is the phase that happens after impact. So now it's about prevention, advocacy. So all of this that we're doing is about preparedness. I might say something here today that might just impact somebody to do something positively to reduce, you know, the effects of any emergency that can happen. Then when we think of events, we have to think of the scope of the event. So we might have, let's say, flooding in a community and it displaces 2 or 3 families. It may not become a national emergency, but it is an emergency at the local level. So as we say, over time, that face have changed. I would speak honestly to say that I believe that we have people that are trained. The extent to which we have resources might be another issue. So if you have people trained and you don't have resources, then there's nothing you can do. You have the knowledge, but you cannot put it to use. I mean, recently, as in a few days ago, the pending impact of Tropical Storm Dorian, now a Category 4 hurricane, he was kind of coming towards us, and we still panicked for some reason, and there's always going to be that anxiety. What we want to see maybe decreasing is the level at which the supermarkets get flooded just because there's a pending event. We need to be prepared at all times in case anything happens, not only the hurricanes. We could have a tsunami, we can have an earthquake. Now the probability of something happening may be high, maybe less. I believe the history we've had with economic impacts has been from hurricanes, and maybe that's where the anxiety stems from. But we also have the issue of complacency. So prior to Hurricane Ivan, we had 49 years or so without any emergency or impact from hurricane. Then we had Hurricane Ivan, but this year comes 7th September, it's going to be 15 years since we've had a high impact from a hurricane again. And every year that go by, we kind of get comfortable in the seat and think that nothing's going to happen or something may not happen. But we encourage our persons to be prepared. Now, the issue of preparedness, again, we may have done everything that NADMA said to do. And when the impact happens, because it is so severe, we have to deal with what happens afterwards.
Right.
So we may be preparing, yes, we know where the shelter is, we know all of that, we know we're prepared to go there, but it might be the shelter that's impacted. Then what? So that you always have to have this thing called contingency planning, always what if, because nothing is cast, as we say, in stone, and things can happen. So I believe we have a lot of people out there well trained. However, if the impact of the emergency affects me, for example, so somebody in my family may have died because of an event, then that takes away a resource from your human resource, because I may not be able then to give service because I am one of the persons affected. So that is something we even have to think beyond the box. What happens when the caregiver themselves might be a casualty in something that has happened? So it's ongoing planning, and again, we have to have MOUs in place. Saying it and not having it is something else. So
well, that's, you mentioned MOUs. We hear so much about MOUs being signed in this place, and then nothing ever comes of them.
So that's the thing, and we have to practice. So I was having a recent conversation with my staff at the Red Cross, because I must say I'm volunteer. So we kind of talk about how do we want to see this look. And we got down to talking, and I said, we should meet with some of the local partners, local corporate persons, and on a monthly basis, try out those MOUs, take some goods, have a credit, pay for it, and then, so if something were to happen, you have that kind of set up already, and practicing. So it's different than just have it on paper, and you maybe never really tried it. Hence comes in the need for simulation, and some people believe that way we must not spend money for simulating things, but it's the only thing we have to test what we have, and to learn from it. So simulations are actually a good way to see if this thing works.
Speaking about simulations, and I have to jump in here, I know that you guys, back in the days of Madman with you, there were simulations. When you put out these calls for participation and advising people that there's going to be a simulation taking place today, what has the response been like, Samantha?
So I could refer to TradeWinds 2016. That was the last big one we had. And the report from that had some really favorable things. But again, remember, the extent of a simulation sometimes is staged. So it's not the real thing. So for example, we mobilized persons in the communities to be evacuees from tsunami, if there was a tsunami call. And we got people to come out. We got children, we got parents, we got people in the community. But you also had people who didn't care and they didn't want to take part in this thing. And it's all fair and fine. But should the real thing happen is another story. Now, we practice in the day. What if this thing happens at night? What if it happens on a public holiday? What if it's happened on a weekend? So we tested it at one time of the day, one sort of conditions, but it's something that always have to be ongoing. We have things like Carib Wave, and it's an annual exercise in March, and more we're seeing interest, because I think Grenada last registered about 15,000 people that would have received some kind of message, that would have taken part in some kind of activity, that received some kind of information. But again, I personally have complaints about all those texts that I receive. I have to confess that I don't read half of them now, and I just click on them and delete and clean up the box, because I get about 10 or so texts a day, and I have both carriers. And so sometimes the things that we relied on in the past, so for example, we may have an understanding with the telecommunication companies, but if they were to send out just another text that was meant as a tsunami warning, for example, I probably would miss it personally, because I don't go through and read all those texts now, because it's just so many. So for me, texting now has become something more of advertisement. And you get a lot of those deals and whatever else happens on there. But again, as planners and managers, we have to kind of think ahead. I always encourage those persons who can make it happen to talk to people like you, who can get information out there, bring you on board and make you a partner, so that when something happens, you are the conduit to getting information to people. We still have to consider not everybody have a smartphone. We still have to consider the internet may go down. And what do you do when the internet disappears? Do you have the bullhorns and the donkeys there? Because you might have to resort to that to get information out. So while we harness technology, we still have to think about the person who still read the newspaper, or the person who still rely on the once a week news. So, those kind of things. So we have to keep up with the changes, but at the same time, remember the traditional ways of doing things.
Overall, though, would you say that we are prepared? And when I ask that question, I'm dealing specifically with hurricanes, because we know that preparedness varies with different types of disaster.
Right. So it's not one of those questions that you can say yes or no. I can speak from the Red Cross perspective, for example. Right now we have, let's say, supplies for 200 families. And it's when we say NFIs, we mean non-food items. So we might have some pots and pans, we might have some hygiene things, yeah? But then what happens if we have 500 families impacted?
Okay.
See?
Yeah.
So when you answer the question yes or no, it's kind of still balanced. We have people that could do the job. But if we don't get the donations to have the things ready, then we have people trained, but not the things to deliver. It goes back as well, how we construct our homes, for example. Are they hurricane proof? We are building a lot of new homes now. Are we including the hurricane straps? Are we doing the shutters, or is it the style of the day, you know? So it goes back to planning, to construction, to drainage, to overhanging things, to debris. If we have any kind of high wind, the amount of debris that's gonna go flying, and sometimes the debris is what caused the damage. Back in Ivan, all my windows got crushed because of flying debris. And I might have cleaned up my little portion, but if the neighbor didn't,
that's right,
then his or her debris comes flying at me, and there's nothing I can do about it, you know, because it's nature, it's wind, and things happen. And we hear the stories all the time when, you know, people say, well, these things came flying across, or roofs, for example, you know, did some of the destruction. But to say, I would never say that we're fully prepared. There's always room for growth. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to be available after impact. We have sat phones, the satellite telephones, for example, and they failed in Dominica during the last hurricanes. They had them, but they went down because maybe the antennas went down, and then the services somehow didn't work until immediately after the hurricane had passed and things had settled.
That's something I really want to get my hands on.
Yes, but it's reliable. It's costly though, but it's reliable at least, because even if all towers are down and what have you afterwards, you can connect via satellite to somebody out there and get help.
But in general, we are in 2019. Would you say that, you know, 5 years ago we were in fact a lot less prepared for disaster management than we are right now? Have we made headway?
In terms of human resource capacity, we've made headway because we've done a lot of training. And right now, if people were to put that training into practice, we have a lot of people in communities that are trained in many different areas of emergency response. From the Red Cross alone, we do first aid and CPR. We do a program called Community Disaster Response Teams. We are in 32 communities right now. We've trained people in almost all those communities or cross sections of them. 2 days ago, we had psychosocial training at the Red Cross. We would have trained for the Ministry of Social Development and the Ministry of Education quite a number of people in various disaster management aspects. So the knowledge is there. The knowledge is there. What I'd like to see is the introduction of a disaster management legislative law. So for example, that would take care of, let's say, the overhanging branches. So when you have overhanging branches or derelict things, we can actually point to the law that actually hold somebody responsible for moving that and so on. While the process may take longer now, there's no law, I don't believe. When I left, there was the bill, the disaster management bill, but it has not become legislated as in the law. We can be taken to court for something that you breached in the disaster management law.
How do you manage to get public buy-in? I mean, you guys can go ahead and do all this sort of preparedness, training and what have you. But if the public doesn't show a really genuine interest, except when they hear there's a storm a couple hundred miles east of Grenada, how do you change that, Samantha?
It takes one to change one. We have been reaching out to people, and we've been getting them on board. We have been getting the nays as well, but you're right. At the end of the day, we're going to have a large population to look after, and it's probably going to take the hard work of a few to get it done. But I can also tell you that disaster brings out the best in people, because after any emergency that I've known that we've had since I've been a volunteer of the Red Cross, people come out to help. What we have to do is to try to get all those people ahead of time trained. So when they come out to help, we don't have to waste time saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. They already know. So that's why a lot of energy is being dispensed to kind of get people ready, so that if it does happen, we can say, you know what, we have trained 5,000 people in this methodology. We have at least maybe 4,000 who's willing to come back if something should happen. So that is where we get the motivation from to continue training people across the length and breadth of our Tri-Island state.
one matter that really concerns me, and this is before we move away from disaster preparedness. Samantha, today is the 30th? 31st day. So tomorrow marks the start of the second half of the hurricane season. Samantha, I would have assumed that the distribution of a list of hurricane shelters would have been a priority, which should have been addressed before the hurricane season starts. And if even you're unable to do it when the hurricane season starts, please, a month. Hey, Samantha, it's been 3 months. 3 months. We don't have a list of shelters.
Right.
How do you justify that?
So I don't know what has happened because I'm no longer in the seat. I know for the last couple of years we were able to get it out by April of the year. So, but again, in the interim, I know, in the interim of not having the list, what I do know stood up was the previous list. So unless a new list comes out, we're in 2019, so the 2018 list is what we work with. In the absence of a 2019 list, just so that you know the shelters that we should be. So as a citizen, that's what I would look towards, the 2018 list. But you are right, and I'm not sure what are the factors involved in not having that list.
You just raised an important point. Let me jump in here. You mentioned that we could use
the 2018, the list before.
You know, this is what really concerned me, and I heard this coming from a minister of government in charge of disaster management. He was saying, well, you know, the list is not ready because, you know, we had some work to be done, but it's going to be ready in a week or two. It's like, that's fine. I understand that. But Samantha, why you have a list from last year, okay? Not everybody's going to keep their list from last year.
Recirculate that list.
Recirculate for crying out loud. Just give the people, say, folks, listen. The list is not complete, but listen, if something happened...
the 2018 one again, in the interim.
Not done, Samantha, not done.
Yeah. So I'm agreeing with you on that. I mean, and so maybe that should have been done in the interim. But just so that we know, once one list is not out, it's the previous one that would be used until that list comes out.
If even the previous list is going to be used, what's wrong in making an official statement? Hey, use the previous list. Maybe because some of those shelters are no longer available.
But again, remember with the shelter inspection, once it's a shelter, most times if there hasn't been any, let's say, physical infrastructure issues, it would probably remain on the list. And then the thing is, we're supposed to, in community, try to locate new properties that probably could be used and suggest those to the shelter inspection people. So I really don't know the factors why it isn't out. It's 3 months into it and we should have it. So maybe, again, programs like these would cause us to, you know, step up our game as planners and do better. That's you know.
All right, Samantha, listen, we're running out of time. I knew this would be an interesting conversation and I knew that I should have allotted more than 30 minutes, but we still have 3 months to go. And again, as we mentioned earlier on in the program, when people talk about disaster management here in Grenada, they're generally talking about hurricanes, okay? But somebody in your position with the Red Cross and formerly with Madman, you know that there are other things that we need to keep our eyes open for, things like tsunamis and earthquakes and flooding and stuff like that.
All those other things.
I want you to talk to the people, the viewers, about the need for that type of preparedness, because people need to not just think about when the wind blows.
Exactly, exactly. That's very true. I mean, you know, I was sharing the experience with a colleague of mine and saying, I'm in the south working. What if I live in the north and I go down to the south and something happened and I can't get back home? What is it in place for family? You know, you have to bring it home. So on a daily basis, families with kids, for example, need to have a plan that if for whatever reason mommy or daddy did not make it home today and we are stuck somewhere, what is it you should do? What's the plan on a daily basis? You know, we should be planning for things like that. But again, as you say, we have fires, for example, and families not just with children, but any families, because you could have fires caused by electrical faults, you could have fires caused by kids playing with things they're not supposed to be playing with, exactly. And just accidents can happen. So we have to think about all the things that could impact families. So as a family, I need to gather all the members of my family around, and it's like a mini workshop. And there's a family plan. What are the things that we could be at risk for? If it's evacuation, then we need to know where we're evacuating to. If we get separated and something happened, where do we meet up next? Who do we go to? So if we separated, the one thing I know is that we're going to meet at X place when all this is done. So, these are things that we ought to have on a daily basis. I know some persons and some families are, as we say, trying hard to make ends meet on a daily basis. And yet here are these people saying, well, you must have a bag packed with these food stuff and whatever else. And when that food stuff could well be the food for today. So again, that's where the national system maybe come in. So in the event that something happens, that those are the families that we kind of reach out to try to help, because we know they were unable to maybe put aside all the things that we asked them to put aside in a kit to make a family disaster kit. Because in there you want to have food for a couple of days, you want to have medicines, toys, if you care for the elderly, things for the elderly. And we're asking you to put that aside and leave it there and not touch it, and especially during the hurricane season for 6 months. Some families can't afford to do that. But for those of us who may be able to do that, it is one step in the right direction. I had the conversation where a family was saying, oh, well, we did everything that we were supposed to do, and when the hurricane hit, it took the food away as well, because it flattened everything. And that was unfortunate, but we know the impact of Hurricane Ivan, and it did happen. But it doesn't say that it takes away the need to be prepared. Having a family plan in terms of the doctors that look after your family. If I'm not there, who takes over control? Who heads the family? And so these are things we ought to be doing, not just for the hurricane season, but year round. As I said, comprehensive disaster management. It could be floods, landslides, tsunami, earthquakes, anything,
You mentioned ought to be doing, and I think this is so sad, because what it says about us is that, we are a reactive society. You mentioned things that we need to be doing on a daily basis. Now, I'm not going to ask Grenadians to plan a strategy meeting every day, but you were talking a little while ago about sitting down for maybe an hour every 6 months, 3 months or 6 months, and say, hey guys, listen, in the event of this, this is what we're going to do. We'll rendezvous here, rendezvous there, It doesn't have to be on a daily basis, but 6 months.
Once, as you say, once a year for that matter. Once a year, you know. And things change, because we may have a plan, and in the family it's 3 of us. And if something were to happen, I'm the one to fill the water and put it there. And then the time comes for that, and I'm not there. So who takes over that role? So these are simple. Yeah. You just meet, you talk about it, and you kind of figure out what's next if something should happen. So that when you get, at least for hurricanes and so on, we get warning. We sit down and we watch the thing coming. We have time. What if we were sitting here right now and the building began to shake? It's an earthquake.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah. In this moment. So you have to plan for the quick onset things as well, and the what ifs, and what are all the risks that can happen to families.
You just made a shrill run up and down my spine as you mentioned the word earthquake, because when we had that earthquake
in October last year, was it?
Last year? Yeah. Samantha, I was sitting in this very chair reading that monitor there, and things started just...
I hope you got under that table right there.
No, Samantha, I did not get under the table. I rushed outside. I have to confess to you, I keep hearing get under a table. It's something that I have just not been able to ingrain in my head. My thought was get the hell out of this place.
I was teaching a class at the college, and it was an adult class after work. I had 25 people. And they left me in there. I was in there alone.
Under the table.
And they left me in there alone. But I knew and I kept trying to say, well, you have to get down under the table. But again, it will happen. It will happen. We do this a lot with kids in school, and it works. It's harder to do it with adults, because I think kids know they get under the table. We've been doing it a lot. Yeah. But you're right. We react, and in the spur of the moment, we just do the reflex thing and to run. But when you run outside, you have fallen poles, you have electrical things. It's probably safer inside. Under the table, in the bathtub, in a strong place. Protecting your head and
I cannot
neck.
fit into my bathtub.
But you have tables, and some people even say, like, depending on the construction, the doorways and study areas, you must find that, foundation kind of part in the house where you could probably take refuge. But the running outside is dangerous in that poles and wires start going everywhere, and that causes more impact and damage.
Samantha, this conversation has been very, very enlightening, and I'm so happy that I've been able to have this. And, I just want your closing thought on, don't you think that this type of thing should be mainstreamed? It seems like during the hurricane season, just before the hurricane season, we start talking about hurricanes, okay? And then the hurricane season goes, and that's it. But, disaster preparedness is something that could be called upon at any time.
Any moment, any time, by anyone.
Throughout the course of the year, maybe there should be more conversations like this, or public service announcements, just infiltrating the media out there.
Yes, it's a cultural change, as we say, and a good way to end is how we started: comprehensive disaster management. It's not just about prevention and preparedness, but it's about being able to respond and being able to rehabilitate as well, and reconstruct. So all those are phases of the emergency, and then you think about all the different events that we could plan and prepare for. But at the end of the day, there's responsibility for everyone. We cannot sit back and say, well, I'm depending on the other person to do it. There's a role for each person to be prepared and to volunteer. Volunteering is one of the things that I'd like to see as well, because even at the Red Cross, for example, the stronger we are to be able to get this right is based on the power of our volunteers. We only pay 2 staff. Let's say we have 100,000 people. There's no way, you could do the math, there's no way 2 people could sit at that office and run an operation. So the entire disaster management function for many organizations are run by volunteers. So if something were to happen, we need people who would say, okay, I settle my family, just make sure they're safe, and let me go out there and do something for somebody else. That is how we're going to get back on our feet. You cannot underestimate or underscore the importance of volunteerism. This is a 24/7 volunteer job. The satisfaction comes from when you meet somebody who you don't even know and they say, thank you for what you do. Because of you, I was able to hear something you said, and I prepared, and that's, it benefited me and the family. And it's just, I impress volunteerism as well.
Let me tell you what, I'm gonna try and lead the way by volunteering with the Red Cross right now to help you guys in any way possible to disseminate information and
we need
on
that.
A regular basis. Okay.
Thank you. Well, we need that.
Samantha Dixon, who happens to be the president of the Grenada Red Cross Association?
Grenada Red Cross Society.
Grenada Red Cross Society, and formerly the disaster management disaster
acting deputy up at NADMA.
At NADMA. Good to see you, girl. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you for having me, and I do look forward to being back again and doing what it takes to keep us safe.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.
Interesting little tete-a-tete we had yesterday afternoon, mid-afternoon. The lady's very articulate, isn't she? I think it was the first time she's been on this program, and enjoyed having her. One of the things I learned after that interview is that something I've been speaking about seems like ad infinitum. You have probably noticed that a lot of you who go directly to the National Hurricane Center's website for updates on tropical weather systems, you know that the folks here in Grenada are usually somewhat behind in getting this information out. When I get it, let's say the NHC is putting out something at 11 o'clock. I pull it up at 11 o'clock and I will stick it up on my website. And you may not hear about that for 2, 3, 4 hours, sometimes if ever, from the local people. Well, apparently last year there was a dramatic reduction in the time lapse between the time that the NHC puts out a statement and the time that the folks here actually release that information. But guess what? It's now slipped back to 3 hours this year. It's taking 3 hours for these folks here to interpret what the NHC is saying and then get it out to you. Kind of pathetic, isn't it? Kind of pathetic. And then they get upset when you and I go directly to other sources for our information. And they keep reminding us in every release that they put out, NADMA is the official source of whatever. Ain't gonna work, folks. Ain't gonna work. Get your act together. Get your act. And then you won't have the Grenadian people come beating a path to your door. Okay? Thank you. Now, where are we? Next, our second pre-recorded segment this morning is the conversation I had with Scunny, Mr. Brian Pitt, my early morning grand dance partner. We had this conversation on Friday morning, during which he touched on a number of issues. One of them was the matter surrounding the lecture that was given by the Prime Minister's press secretary to the local media corps. He also talked about the increase in contributions to the NIS, and I know that one's going to be of great interest to you folks. And then the fight, the government fighting against Grenlec. He also talked about the fact that a lot of parents are having a tough time getting their kids ready to go back to school this week. Yeah. And a number of other things. So let's take a quick little break here, and then we'll come back with Brian.
Can I have a chicken lunch, please? Large.
Real nice today.
Mm-mm. I don't want that.
But you just asked for a chicken lunch.
I don't have problem with the lunch. Afraid the container.
What is the problem with it?
These styrofoam containers, they don't good for the environment. They shorten with life.
What foolishness you telling me? So what you want me to use?
Put my food in this.
Where you get that?
At the food fair, where you could get all biodegradable food boxes and disposable food supplies like cups, plates, anything you could think about. Name it, it's there. And they don't harm the environment. Food fair, taking the lead in cleaning up and protecting the environment. Hey, like you take me advice, you get in your biodegradable food supplies.
Well, girl, I supporting who's supporting the environment. That is why I shop in at food fair.
Food fair, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets. Products distributed by Hubbard's agency, Hygiene Boulevard.
We are honored to partner with the Grenada Schools, Inc., the Ministry of Education, and the Calice Government School in providing this library. GCPI program put $120,000 or 66% of the cost of the library. But it's not an investment that is intended to bring a financial return. It is an investment in the human capital of our youth in Grenada.
Grenlec has shown us their seriousness about partnership, their seriousness about education, and their seriousness about nation building. That local partnership tells our major donors that Grenada is interested.
We have got a big vision, Grenada Schools. We believe that what we can do is, through literacy, have the most literate country in the Caribbean. We are very happy that you've got this gift from ourselves and from Grenlec.
We see this library as a unique and valuable resource. One of the best things about receiving this library is that it honors and recognizes the efforts and contributions of a company like Grenlec and Grenada Schools Incorporated.
Since 1994, Grenlec shareholders have invested over $22 million. This has been invested in the communities throughout Grenada, CLICO, and Pitt, Martinique. We hope this library will serve the students and school well for many years to come.
Because your vehicle is a necessity, being roadworthy is critical. Hubbard's Motor Department introduces its new tire and battery sales and service outlet located at Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, close to the Sugar Mill Roundabout. Available are a wide range of competitively priced tires, maintenance-free batteries, oils and lubricants. Keeping in mind your busy schedule, this outlet is equipped to provide you with fast and reliable service. Simply drive in and you'll be delighted with your service experience. For more information, contact 440-2087. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Folks, for those of you who are anxious to find out whether or not you're ever going to see the money you invested in CLICO and BAICO again, be sure to stick around, because in about half an hour from now, and I know he's there, I just spoke with him and he's always set to go, Patrick Antoine is part of the team trying to recover at least some of those monies for you. So please stick around. Right now, for those of you who don't have the time to join us on weekday mornings at 9 o'clock, here's an excerpt from this past Friday's edition of Good Day Grenada with our good friend and cohort, Brian Pitt. Alrighty, folks, there he is. Now, before I unleash Mr. Pitt this morning, let me make myself comfortable here in my chair. Good morning, Mr. Pitt. How are you, sir?
Good morning, George. I am great. I am great. And yourself?
I'm fine, but I'm assuming that you're great because you went to the beach this morning?
Yes, and I had my helping of grapes. I noticed you were absent.
Yeah. Brian, I was just
your companions was on the beach this morning.
Yes, I noticed. They actually called me at about 8 minutes after 5 o'clock this morning. George, we're on the way to get you. No, you're not, because I ain't going anywhere this morning. I was just too bushed, but I really missed it.
Yes, yes.
How was it this morning?
It's a good place to start the day, George, and I noticed that the seaweed is now in season, so the beach is kind of infested with seaweed.
Oh, really? I was there yesterday. I didn't see any seaweed.
Oh, there was some there this morning. So we have to be careful.
Okay. Well, Mr. Pitt, what has transpired between last Friday morning and now that may have riled you up or not?
Well, George, let me start this morning with you commenting on a lecture by the press secretary to the Prime Minister to the media.
Yes, sir.
And I tell you why I'm going to start there, George, because I want to approach this from a different perspective. You have heard of the Integrity in Public Life Commission, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
The act that governs that commission talks about conflict of interest. And in particular, it talks about conflict of interest as it relates to public officers, whether they are married, who are their families, etc., etc. George, you see where I'm going with this?
Go ahead.
So if the press secretary was familiar with the act that set up the Integrity for Public in Public Life legislation, and in fact that commission, the question of a marital status of a public officer is relevant and important.
She didn't
Am I
think
not
so.
correct, George?
Yes, but she didn't think so.
As a matter of fact, I noticed the former Attorney General talking about a letter to that commission recently, and whether or not there is conflict of interest in the appointment of somebody in the Ministry of Finance. So it is of public interest to Grenadians to know the marital status of those people who represent us. Am I not correct, George?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
So if that young lady did her homework, I think that she is labeling the lack of respect in the wrong place. Now, I suspect that the people or the media representatives who were at that press briefing were not familiar with the act that governs the integrity in public life. Otherwise, they would have raised the point. Because any member of the public with information relative to what could be considered conflict of interest could raise it to the commission, you know. And I could only know that, George, about you if I know that you're married or not. Okay, George?
No comment from me. Never been married. So don't go there, Brian. Don't go there.
So I think that the media or those people who attend these Tuesday press briefings should be familiar with a lot of these things that govern what they're talking about, and in fact raise the relevant points.
Okay, but Brian, stick up in there for a minute, Brian. Both you and I know that a lot of people in the media today are not trained. You're correct.
Yes,
they should be familiar, but they just don't know. But for this lady, I would assume that as press secretary to the nation's prime minister, she should have known better.
Well, you see, maybe in the next press briefing to that one, the media should have done their homework and come back to her and say, but listen, Madam Press Secretary, these are the facts. Would you like to comment? You see, there's a follow-up meeting all the time, George, so there's time to do your homework.
You know, I was pleased to see on Facebook sometime yesterday, I think it was, that a couple of former presidents of the Media Workers Association, because by the way, up to now, MWAG has not come out and issued any statement about that. None. Okay?
Because the president of MWAG, George, works for the GIS.
Exactly. Exactly. But a couple of former presidents of MWAG expressed their disappointment at what transpired at that cabinet briefing. And I was happy to see that. Now, a spokesperson for MWAG also said that MWAG would be issuing a statement later on this week. Should I hold my breath waiting to see that statement? Today is Friday.
No, George, if it happens, it happens. Don't hold your breath.
Okay.
Let's move
on. John Kennison here says, the press secretary was just reading what was given to her. And you know, I alluded to that. I made it clear in my statement, which you saw, that I didn't know whether she was doing that under her own steam or whether or not, you know, it was a result of pressure being applied in certain quarters, you know. But I'll tell you, if she did that under her own steam, I'm really sad. Anyhow, like you said, let's move on.
All right. But you see, George, let me make one final comment before I leave this subject. Did you hear recently the President of the United States talking about being the chosen one?
Yes.
You know, and that hits some people in some places that I won't want to describe on your program, George. But this is the way he felt. Because he believes that everything he says is the truth, even though it's not.
Yeah.
So he's the chosen one. Could you imagine how a politician who has won 15 seats 3 times feel about this subject of being the chosen one? Let's leave that there, George.
Let's leave that there. Dogo Day. By the way, speaking about Dogo Day, Mr. Pitt, and before you move on to whatever else you want, would you hold your mug up for me, please? I saw you flashing a mug a little while ago. If I'm not mistaken, I see a little. Ah, there it is. It's a flowery mug. Am I right?
Yes, it's a flower mug.
All right. Well, Mr. Pitt, I got a brand new mug yesterday. Take a look. Can you see?
Yeah. Yes, George. Yes, George.
Collector's item, man.
You know the good thing about that statement is creating some merchandise and somebody's gonna make some money. As a matter of fact, the person who said that should register that company and make sure that he has a percentage of all the revenue that comes in from that state.
Well, I told the person who sent this to me that if he decides to make this a commercial venture, man, I don't have any money to invest, but I could certainly spread the word out there that this product is available. So, don't
George,
hey?
another very topical, because we went quickly run out of time. Is this
Hey, hold on.
Yeah, okay.
You ain't running out of no time.
Okay, all right.
But Margaret says that is the problem. The MWAG statement should have been issued immediately at best, or within 24 hours at worst.
Yes, Margaret is absolutely right.
She's absolutely right. All right. Now, move on to whatever else is irking you, Pilgrim.
The NIS, George. We are about to increase the contribution to the NIS
January.
to 11%. Pardon me?
January next year?
Oh, it's no longer the 1st of September?
No. I think it's gone to January now.
All right, okay. Well, we are going to increase it to 11%. 1% to employees and 1% to the employers. Because there seemed to be a recurring shortfall in the contributions collected and the amounts being paid out.
Yep.
George.
Yep.
And I couldn't help but ask myself the question, is NIS getting this thing right? Why is the contributions falling? Is it because unemployment is increasing and as a result, contributions are not coming in? Is it because more people are being self-employed? I don't know whether or not we've done the necessary
research
on this problem, George, because if we are not doing the necessary research and we might very well find ourselves increasing the percentage year in, year out in order to meet our targets without finding out what the true problem is. Yes? Mm-hmm. Because, George, you have the same amount of people or more people coming out of school. I don't believe our birth rate is that much affected, has fallen off that much, so we can say that is the result of the decrease in contribution. We have to find out why and do something about it. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. Mm-hmm. Because, as I said on this program some time ago, George, there are a lot of people who are unemployed that are not looking for work. What are they doing? Are they gainfully employed in some area that they are not making a contribution? And could that be considered self-employment? Mm-hmm. Is this contract work affecting the contributions to the NIS? The NIS must ask itself some very important questions and find the answers to them. Otherwise, this program is going to be in jeopardy.
Do you think the shortage of funds at the NIS could be the reason why we have not heard in recent times of demands being made by the government on the NIS coffers? When was the last time you heard the government go into the NIS for funds?
Well,
been a while.
See, George, the beauty about having 15 seats in Parliament is that a lot of these things can happen. You don't know about it yet. The government may very well. I think the government controls the members of the board of that organization, and I don't know whether or not the persons who represent the trade unions or who else on that commission will report to us what happens inside the walls of a board meeting.
Yeah.
It might very well be happening, and we don't know about it.
Yeah. But I just found it noticeable. Anyhow, go ahead.
George, this whole Grenlec issue, and you mentioned it just now, is becoming bothersome. It's becoming bothersome because we continue to go down the road of a fight with Grenlec. And I noticed, if correct, that we lost another round in the court to Grenlec.
Yes.
And this fight seemed to be a personal fight, George. And if this is going to continue, it will continue to cost the people of Grenada a considerable amount of money. When is it going to stop? Because I don't believe that there's any signal that this thing is going to stop it.
You know, I think a lot of people are looking and waiting very, very impatiently for the outcome of the recent hearing at the Court of Justice. I think that's due sometime in September, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Because let me tell
you.
Well,
let's hope that will put an end to this craziness, because it's going to end up costing the people of Grenada and the taxpayers the hell out.
Well, now that's contradictory. You're saying put an end to it. If Grenlec wins, this country loses big time, because
yes, and if the government wins, we might be in some other trouble, because they're now controlling that 5% fund, which they can do whatever they want to do with it, and they might have to run this electricity company for a while until they find somebody who is knowledgeable in the field to take it in.
Yeah. Margaret says the Grenlec fight is personal.
It is personal, and I think we all know that. And most of the enablers are refusing to accept that and debate it. This is all personal.
John says, Brian, definitely more than the 5% they wanted. In other words, it's going to cost the government a lot more than the 5% they've been trying to weasel out of Grenlec.
And the fallout to the people of Grenada are going to be even worse, because a lot of the social programs that Grenlec is now funding, that Grenlec finds interesting to the betterment of Grenada itself, that might not be the same as the government of Grenada. The government of Grenada has particular interests. They have an interest in winning seats. They have an interest in staying in power. So their objectives might be a little different.
Now, if Margaret is right when she says here that the fight is personal, doesn't that dull the hopes for Grenlec? I mean, I'm sure the court's going to recognize something here and say, hey, listen, man, you didn't have a shot in the first place. Why don't you keep your tail quiet?
Well, anybody reading that file, George, that goes back to Gregory Bowen being the manager of Grenlec, I believe will come away with that conclusion, that it has become personal over time. And I don't think that even those people involved in the fight right now will disagree that there is some personal interest attached to it. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So I don't know where we're going with this.
All right, I'm sure.
George, I want to end with on two subjects.
Go ahead.
I know you could be around another time. I think it was Friday. Today is Friday. Thursday, I was in the Grandance area, and there was an event at the Grandance playing field. George, I don't know if you're aware of it. This event apparently was a Grenadian living outside of Grenada, who came and were distributing books and school supplies in the playing field in Grandance. They had tents set up, and George, I have never seen in one assembly more people, parents and children, waiting to get something free to send their children back to school. When I looked at the crowd, George, I'm saying to myself, but if this event did not take place, where would these parents be getting school supplies and other things to send their kids back to school in September? There were thousands of people there, George, which tells me there's something wrong. Yeah? Are the parents meeting their obligations, their financial obligations, to get their kids back to school in September? Do they all need help? Yes. And do we have to get some more philanthropists like this lady giving out school supplies in order that these parents can meet their children's obligations?
The parents are squinting, Brian. Scrunting.
I know, George, and if that is so, what are we doing about it?
Yada, yada,
Because
yada.
I tell you something, George. There was a, what was it, a conference, I believe, held in Grenada recently about trafficking, human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct, George?
I heard about that.
I heard recently about human trafficking, and they were trying to explain to our young people that they should not fall for some of these attractive-looking things that appear on the internet, promising you jobs where it might be for something else. But if unemployment is high, George, and a lot of our young people are not getting sustainable employment, would they not be tempted by some of these things that appear on the internet?
Yeah.
And as a result, getting into trouble?
Yeah.
George, we have to see beyond our noses. And you know, we broke ground on another hotel recently, and I asked myself the question, how many jobs are going to be created, and what kind of jobs are going to be created by these groundbreakings all over the country? We seem to have a one-dimensional kind of economy, George, and we're going to get into trouble sooner than later. Our young people get into trouble sooner than later if we continue this trend in the development of this country.
Well, being somebody with big floppy ears, which are always wide open, I'm sure that you have heard that there's another issue brewing, this time around the Citizenship by Investment program.
Yes, George, and because we, over time, have acquired a lot of land from a lot of people, George, in the public interest. And a lot of the land that has been acquired in the public interest for so-called hotel projects that fell apart is still out there and is handed from one developer to the other. And people are not being compensated. And that is going to come back to haunt us, George. We have to find a way of compensating people if we're going to acquire land in the public interest.
Yeah.
And the court might be very well becoming aware of this situation, George, and deciding to do something about it.
Yes, I saw that they've taken action. All right, Brian, I know you're anxious to get out of here, but a couple of comments very quickly. Peter Bishop says, and Brian, that event in Grand Anse, lots of children walked away empty-handed because there was not enough for all who attended.
I would want to believe that to be true, George. The amount of kids I saw there, this one person could not have had the supplies to give to everybody.
Donna Joseph says, Brian, lots of those parents voted out the free school book program because they'd rather become dependent instead of become independent in order to feed themselves and their children. I may sound cold, but that's the reality.
One of the bigger realities, George, is that political parties from time to time create the politics of dependence. We are not all born equal, George. Some of us are slow developers, some are fast developers. So we have to look after those people who cannot look after themselves. I'm a socialist, basically, George. So social programs are important. You know, we can't just write them off because somebody get them a work, and as long as they get that $400 every week, they're contented with that and continue to make sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Pitt. Well, there you have it, folks. Mr. Brian Pitt. There is a gentleman who cares about Grenada. He's deeply concerned about what he sees happening, just like you, just like me. And he does his homework. Now, just let me give you a quick glance at my next guest. There he is. Excuse me, not Mr. This is Dr. Patrick Antoine. We're going to get, I'm not even going to ask him to say hi yet. Well, we're going to get to him in just a wee bit. And I'll tell you, we have a very, very interesting conversation coming your way next. So stick around with us for the next maybe 40 minutes or so.
You don't know how many hurricanes will be coming this season, so you need to be prepared. At Hubbard's Hardware and Building Supply departments and food fair supermarkets, everything from canned foods, flashlights and batteries, to plywood, tarpaulin, lanterns, roof repair kits, water tanks, etc. are available. For over 90 years, we've helped you prepare for and recover from storms. Hubbard's Hardware, food fair supermarkets, and the Grenadian General Insurance, an integral part of your hurricane preparedness plan.
Good morning, Grenlec meter reader.
Morning, Mr. Meterman. I'm glad I caught you. Last month, I got a very high bill, and I don't understand why.
Last month we were not able to access your meter, so we had to estimate the bill. This will happen if we don't get an actual reading.
So what can I do to ensure that my meter is easily accessible?
Well, you can get your licensed electrician to move your meter outside of the gate or directly in front of the house. That way, I'll have easy access and I won't have to deal with your dog.
Ah, Butch.
Yes, dogs can be a problem sometimes. On one occasion, I was attacked by a dog and police had to get involved. Customers who don't want to cage or tie their dogs should really move their meter and make it easily accessible.
Well, I'll consider that.
Thank you.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try their sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Alrighty, folks, time to say good morning to our good colleague. There he is, Dr. Patrick Antoine. Patrick, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, George. I'm very well. It's great to be with you on this beautiful morning in Grenada.
Are you in Grenada this morning?
Yes, I got in a short while ago. I would have joined you, but I didn't want to disrupt your program.
Boy, let me tell you, you couldn't do any more disruption than we have already had this morning. But thanks a lot. You know, Patrick, it's always such a pleasure talking with you. I like to think of you as an all too infrequent visitor. If only you could keep your tail here in Grenada for a little, for a little bit, we get to see a little bit more of you, wouldn't we?
Well, I'd love to be here, particularly because this is where my heart continues to be, and of course, the core of my family. But unfortunately, circumstances are what they are. You sort of you roam to where the work takes you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Patrick, we know that you're an accomplished attorney. You were Grenada's former ambassador to the OECS. If I were to ask you to tell me, who is Patrick Antoine? What the heck would you say, Patrick?
If you were to ask me, who am I?
Yeah.
Well, I would first of all say that I am certainly, I would begin by telling you I'm the son of Joyce and Alphonsus Antoine of blessed memory. This is my father.
Yes, remember.
And for me, that means a lot. Most people don't know this, but we have a direct link to when we first arrived from a very proud, strong Negro Igbo, a man who arrived as a slave who was nicknamed Gru Gru. And of course, from him came a lot of the genes and a lot of the dynamism and a lot of the energy and certainly the acumen and acuity, which I think most of my family members have been bequeathed with. And then I would tell you that I'm a product of our society, that were it not for Mrs. Antoine, Timothy Antoine's mother, and my own mother, Joyce Antoine, and so many other people who have invested in me as a student, as a budding reprobate at that time. I would then take you to Cadgett and Hood, who you've heard me speak about quite. Then I would take you to George Brazan. And I would say that I'm a product of all of these people. I'm a product of St. Andrews and Montmorris and Tempe and certainly Granance, and all of those things go into a melting pot in making Patrick Antoine who he is. And to my mind, all of that is underscored by a just indefatigable belief in Jesus Christ. Just an absolutely incredible grounding in God, though as a teenager you deviate. In the years before us, we tend to converge back, and I'm certainly back now in the fold of a practicing, believing, faith-trumping man of God, and that is where I am now, and I'm a father.
You just made my day, Patrick. You just made my day. Now, the reason why you are sitting here with me this morning is because sometime during the week, I received a press release which I think has given a lot of hope. I published it on the Grenada Broadcast website, and I think it's given Grenadians a lot of hope that their dream of recuperating some of their investment, at least some of their investment, has not all been shattered. And I see here that there's a group calling themselves the Expert Trade Law. What the heck is Expert Trade Law? Because they're about to pursue the recuperation of these people's funds.
Yeah, George, well, I think you've touched on a very important issue for our civilization, not just now, but our civilization going forward. Civilization in Grenada, civilization in the OECS. Yes, a lot of people invested in British American and CLICO. And the promise then was that they would get higher rates of interest, higher rates of return, rates on their investment, above that which was offered by the commercial banks and the other investment instruments around at that time. And you have to understand that this is where the story becomes important and interesting, because many of those people did those investments not only because they wanted higher rates, but because they felt the higher rates were safe. And they felt it was safe because many of the government entities, the statutory corporations, they themselves had invested in those instruments, and in many of those instances, there was government representation on the board of those institutions. And of course, many believing investors at that time were of the view that these investment instruments were actually monitored and sanctioned by the Ministry of Finance, the Supervisor of Insurance, etc. And so they felt that there was minimal risk having regard to all the factors I just told you. Not so. As you know, in 2009, it was the perfect storm. And of course, the British American investments went belly up along with the CLICO policyholders investments, with the CL Financial debacle in Trinidad and Tobago, where they were forced to approach the government for a loan, as it were, because they were facing liquidity challenges. And of course, the government did not grant a loan. Instead, they stepped in and assumed the assets of the entities. And with that, they ring-fenced the assets in Trinidad and Tobago. So this is where I think the issue really becomes. And with them ring-fencing the assets in Trinidad, George, and with the Barbadian government ring-fencing the assets in Barbados, it left the OECS countries out that did not have the supervisor of insurance, as it were, maintain the statutory fund at a level that would cover the investment instruments in the individual OECS countries. So again, that is where we are. And a lot of people have been hurt, as you've properly pointed out.
But let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, because you just touched on a very important point. You said these people made their investments, one, because they wanted a higher yield, but probably more importantly, because they trusted that these investments would be safe. Now, maybe not everybody goes through the proper due diligence, but would it be fair on my part to assume that many people did go through the due diligence and found the investment to be safe. In which case, one has to ask the question, is there anything more they could have done better to guarantee the safety of their investments?
Very complex question. Let me answer it this way. Again, your question's always very intuitive. The first part of your question regarding whether the proper due diligence was undertaken, and if it was, would it have made a difference, is very, very important. Let me say that I'm perhaps one of the last persons to have put money in British America. And I say so without any embarrassment, now though at the time I was extremely embarrassed when the thing went belly up. But let me tell you that I did my due diligence. And the problem that we have, George, is that the accounts were not properly prepared. We have some challenges in believing the credibility of some of the numbers, and that is, of course, subject to a different process, which is why I'm so cautious with my language. Only to say that it appears as though the accountants or the accounting firms may have been certifying accounts that should not have been certified, may have been signing off on accounts and giving it a clean bill of health or rites of passage, as I would say when I lecture, that really should have received a very soon and sudden stop. Something's wrong here. So that when you look at the accounts of some of the entities and you look at the accounts of CL Financial, you are never really getting a complete picture of what the true status of the companies were, because the accounts were deliberately reported in a manner, to my mind, as an economist, which was intended to mislead. That's the first set of issues. Now, if Patrick Antoine can be telling you that, then you have to understand that Mrs. James from Pitt, who doesn't have an economics degree, even when she asks her questions, isn't going to be as piercing in her questioning as I would have been. And if I could have said, having carried out the due diligence, I found it okay, you know, we can then understand why so many ordinary people were also caught in this. In short, I'm saying that there was a problem. But the second problem is that they trusted the system at home. So if you were St. Lucian, you would not have had as major a problem as if you were non-St. Lucian in the context of the OECS, because the St. Lucian supervisor of insurance made sure that the statutory fund was maintained at a level sufficient to cover the investments from St. Lucians in British America, while that was not the case in, for instance, Grenada, St. Vincent, Dominica, etc. And of course, now that I know how this thing unfolded, the story gets curious and curious. But point of fact is that there were a number of systemic failures, including failures, I believe, in the way in which these investments that are not domiciled, not maintained, controlled, and operated from your own jurisdiction was handled. So yes, there was in fact a trust factor that was put there by policyholders, and that trust was breached, pure and simple. It was breached.
So essentially what you're saying to me, Patrick, in somewhat different words, is that this is a very complex matter, very complex. Now, I know that a lot of time has elapsed and a lot of people are now aware of the CLICO BAICO issue. Well, I want you to take a minute and take a few minutes and do a summary of what has us where we are today, having this conversation. And then we'll talk about how you intend to go about handling this.
Yeah, sure. So where we are today, George, is that people like myself felt hard done by. And in 2010, personally, I contracted individually, as Patrick Antoine, Joe Public, a legal team in Trinidad to help me get my own funds back. And I tried to interest parties in Grenada and the other countries at that time, but many people were very frankly put, George, embarrassed. Many people were embarrassed because people would find out how much money they lost, i.e. how much money they had. And of course, in these small countries, that we have our own idiosyncrasies, and people finding out that you have $1 or $2 million or $500,000 in British American is a source of embarrassment for some people. Of course, later, we found that there was an appetite for the sort of, let us call it the broad-based, I want to say the armada, the group support, to go after our rights where these policies were concerned. But let me just say that part of the reason why people did not act early too, George, that's the second thing, is because they believe that the governments would have stepped in and that the governments would have come to some agreement with the government of Trinidad and Tobago and perhaps Barbados in relation to the assets and, of course, to making sure that they were made whole. Because, George, you have to understand that the several auditing reports have suggested, though we haven't seen the most recent one, that the assets are now sufficient to pay all the policyholders completely. And you would know too that Trinidad and Tobago policyholders have been paid completely because the government stepped in and assumed the assets and gave a loan against it and paid the policyholders in Trinidad and Tobago out. So that the policyholders in Trinidad and Tobago, for the most part, have been made whole. That's a little bit of a detail we can get into later. But the OECS policyholders have not been made whole at all. And so we've come under this thing called judicial management. Of course, that was put in place, properly so, to make sure that the little bit of assets that existed in the OECS and that the OECS policyholders could, in fact, through the legal systems, get their hands around, that those were used for the benefit of all the policyholders and not just a few. So we are under judicial management, and finally we came to this plan of arrangement, which basically, tells us that, look, the assets that are there, we've been able to recover some more assets, and the point of fact is that, we can expect between 20, 25, perhaps 30 cents on the dollar at best, which of course means that up to 70 cents on the dollar is not going to be recouped from the existing assets that the judicial managers have been able to track and trace and bring into their pot for distribution. So where we are today, George, is that we have a very peculiar situation in CARICOM where all the assets of the companies were built up by the policyholders from the Eastern Caribbean, from other Caribbean countries, from Trinidad and Tobago, from Barbados, from other CARICOM states. So we all contributed to building up those assets through CL Financial. CL Financial was controlled by the group from Trinidad and Tobago, so that giving them that control, they made decisions on where they invest, what they would do with the assets coming in from the Eastern Caribbean and other states where policyholders would buy policies. And of course, we know that they made a number of bad decisions, so that they made bad decisions as a board, CL Financial, and of course their subsidiaries as well. Many of them would have acquiesced in this decision, i.e. they would have agreed. So where we are now is that the government of Trinidad and Tobago comes in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, and it says, great, these are all the assets, the companies, the investments that the policyholders from all the countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, the monies would have built up these assets. The companies that CL would have bought were bought with our funds. And they would have stepped in and said, look, we're keeping these assets, we're going to give a loan against it, and we're going to pay off the Trinidad and Tobago policyholders only. Now, that's a breach in the treaty. That's called discriminatory treatment, because you can't use assets built up from my investment, essentially ring fence it, and use it in a discriminatory manner when it comes to essentially giving a benefit from the asset, discriminating by nationality. And our view is that discrimination by nationality is a fundamental breach of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, which talks about discrimination on the grounds of nationality alone. And we believe that we have a strong case to make before the CCJ. We think that the case is not just a legal case, it's a moral case. We are engaged in a moral battle It's morally wrong for a government to step in, to take the assets of a private entity, to take loans against it, and to essentially treat with it as it deems fit without treating with all the policyholders in the same way.
All right.
We think it's morally wrong. Go ahead, please.
Patrick, you did mention that the government of Trinidad and Tobago did step in, but you said something a little while ago that sort of has my head spinning here. You said that these investors were embarrassed. Why would they be embarrassed? I mean, these guys are not investing in a little shack on the Carinae. You're talking about CLICO, BAICO, major corporations. Why would I be embarrassed to invest with these people?
Well, I don't think they were embarrassed to invest with them. I think they were embarrassed that their peers, the community, their friends, even the governments may find out that they had substantial investments or they had investments in British America. That is the sense I get. And you have to understand, George, that I had to meet with a number of people quietly. And they were the major issue for them was people finding out that they had X amount of money in this thing that they lost. Yes, there was that embarrassment. I use the term embarrassment because I think that's what it was. But I think it was born of several factors, and one of which is islandness. You just don't want the next man to know how well you are, you know, because we have a way of saying, you know, well, boy, I ain't doing good at all, you know, trouble hitting me. Of course, the truth is that when you look at the monies that we had invested in British America, and if we had used it, you know, otherwise, our civilization would have been a lot better off. We would not have needed as much foreign direct investment if we'd invested in our own countries with good returns. So there's a lesson there for us as well. But people were embarrassed, I can tell you that. And up to recently, we got a strong letter from judicial manager because one of the people who are policy holders wrote saying, look, I do not want my information to be released to anyone except to the negotiating team. But let me answer the question on expert trade law. Expert trade law is a group of attorneys and negotiators that have been contracted by British American and CLICO policyholders now of the Eastern Caribbean. It started with Grenada, but you will hear later that we are expanding it to the rest of the Eastern Caribbean. So BAICO, of which I'm the president, would have contracted this group, Expert Trade Law. And Expert Trade Law is comprised of lead attorney, call him the advocate, Simon Davenport QC, from 3 Here Court, one of the leading firms in the United Kingdom in this area. Secondly, of course, they come with a whole team of lawyers. He has juniors and so on working with him. Then we have, interestingly, Dr. Kenny Anthony, who is part of Expert Trade Law, and he's come on as the community law specialist. And Dr. Anthony, people would recall, was perhaps the first general counsel at CARICOM after the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas was adopted by heads. So he's come with a lot of experience, practically and otherwise. And of course, you know his tenure as Prime Minister of St. Lucia. We also have a team of young and very bright lawyers who have worked a lot on CCJ matters. Rafael Ajoda, who worked recently on the matter with TCL, Trinidad Cement Limited. Gerald Thompson, who actually led the Legal and Marine Affairs Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Trinidad and Tobago for a significant amount of time and helped to negotiate the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas and the protocols that led to countries adopting all the provisions in the treaty. So this is expert trade law, and they have the mandate from us of, as it were, giving support and leading the charge on behalf of BAICO before the CCJ. There are a number of other attorneys that are associated with the venture, but I've just called the major ones for you, And that's who expert trade law is. So expert trade law representatives will be here with us this week because they're embarking on an OECS road tour, really to talk about the case and to drum up support politically on the ground among the populace, not among the politicians, the populace, for the importance of the OECS civilization to stand up and to be counted on this matter, if only for posterity, but also on the grounds that are legal.
All right. Now, a few minutes ago, you mentioned to me that there are assets, and these assets are sufficient to repay the policyholders, correct?
That's correct, George. And
where are the
that's
assets?
correct.
Where are the assets, Patrick?
The assets are held, for instance, CL Financial is one of the biggest shareholders in Republic Bank, right? They also own substantially most of the shares in Angostura. And they have a number of other investments where these investments are not doing badly. The government has been repaid, George, follow me. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has been repaid, repaid from the revenues of these companies. And this is a very contentious issue with both the policyholders in Trinidad who feel that they didn't get their pound of flesh closest to the heart, though they got their pound of flesh. They didn't get it closest to the heart because it ended up being 85% of the pound of flesh that they should have gotten. And the policyholders outside, like ourselves, where we believe that we're only going to get 30% at best, what to my mind is looking more like 25% if we're lucky, or 20%. The judicial managers are working hard on this. I take a different view to many people on this matter. We have to pay professionals, and the guys have done yeoman service, George, in trying to chase down some of these assets. But we're going to get 20 or 25 cents. So it means the people in Grenada and St. Vincent, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Antigua and Barbuda, Anguilla, Montserrat, those people are going to be ending up with, rather than with $1 of the investment they put in, more like with 75 or 75% of that not being recouped, which means that they would only get back 25 cents on the dollar. So to my mind, the assets that are there since the government has been paid off already can be used to settle those people in the Eastern Caribbean whose investments built up those companies and who remain unpaid today.
Okay.
And that is our claim, and we think we have a good ground for that, because Trinidad and Tobago established a payoff arrangement using bonds, for instance, that we think is attractive, though we think it need not be as the tenure, we call it the tenure of the bond, the length of years. The tenure of the bond can be shorter, and the upfront payment to Eastern Caribbean policyholders, is certainly something that we believe is on the card. So that's the way I want to answer this question, and giving a sense to the public about why this is not hocus pocus. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has been repaid, and the assets are continue to perform, but the people who built up the assets from the Eastern Caribbean are the only ones. I say Eastern Caribbean, but there are other CARICOM states as well. So you may have a Jamaican, but predominantly the OECS people have not been repaid.
Okay, Patrick, 20%, 25%, even 30%. You're talking a pittance, which could mean an awful lot to a lot of people who are losing 70, 75, 80% of their monies. A lot. And over the years, a name we've heard surface quite a bit was that of one Mr. Dupre. From your perspective, his role in all of this, and people are asking the question, how come this man has been allowed to walk free? Let me hear you on both of those, Patrick.
George, we have tried to focus on the task of getting the funds back rather than on the matters regarding pursuing, as it were, justice, where Mr. Dupre and his team, because he wasn't alone, have been concerned. In fact, Mr. Dupre and his team were found culpable in a Florida circuit court. And if you read the judgment, it is really a very strong indictment of them all. It is tragic for me, George, for two reasons. Mr. Dupree inherited this vision from his father, Cyril Dupree. Mr. Dupree, this is Lawrence's father, would have had a vision of this pan-OECS, pan-Caribbean investment company. And I make no apology for saying that many people were drawn to that because after independence, we didn't have many black entrepreneurs emerging in the Caribbean with a pan-Caribbean vision. Yes, and I want people listening to understand my view. Black people with a pan-Caribbean vision. And that is why that vision was so important. And Lawrence Dupree then took the baton. And no one should find me culpable of misleading them if Cyril was his uncle and not his father. But my memory tells me it was his father. But what's important is the vision. Lawrence took that vision and he was able to develop this franchise model with this insurance company across the Caribbean. And it was a model which, to my mind, George, could have worked well if, George, there was no fraud. George, you have to understand that I differ from many people who argue that the rates were unsustainable. I say nonsense, absolute nonsense. Methanol Holdings Limited, which was a company that was started by investments from the CL Group, for instance, the investment projections was that this company should have paid off for itself in 10 to 12 years. In fact, George, the methanol prices went up and it paid off for itself in 2 to 3 years. And at that time, methanol prices were high, and Trinidad and Tobago, of course, was the second largest exporter of methanol to the United States. So there were a lot of very good investments. Angostura was a good investment, though they may have paid a little too much for it, but they also invested in some very interesting brands. So the vision was a good vision. And I say that I'm saddened because with that, to my mind, has died this pan-Caribbean vision for investments in the way that the old Dupree intended it, where it would bring benefits back to the policyholders in the countries. Not just an insurance instrument, but benefits back to them from the returns on those investments. And that's the sad part. Mr. Dupree is up in age. He may be just beyond 80. I met with him on 3 occasions, personally, on behalf of the BAICO group. And it is clear to me that he's not benefiting from his best health. So there's not much merit in expecting that Mr. Dupree would be made to pay anything. He doesn't have many assets at his personal disposal. I believe the judicial managers are locked in battle with various estates. So to my mind, really for us, the biggest benefit at this stage is not seeing Mr. Dupree behind bars. There's no merit to that really, and that doesn't bring our money back. And Mr. Dupree, for the rest of his years, will have to live with his conscience. And I sensed that he had a problem living with his conscience when I met with him, because I could tell that this was a man under very serious duress and stress, knowing that he'd caused such calamity in so many people's lives. But that's a matter for him and God. We needed to focus on getting the funds back. And for us, the way that we need to do that is to go after that entity that aggrandized the assets and used it for its own purposes. And that is how I want to get around the issue of Mr. Dupree, by focusing us squarely back on where do we get full compensation from, so that we can end up with a dollar on the dollar.
And I imagine that on Tuesday, that's what you're going to be trying to share with the policyholders when you meet with them here.
Indeed.
All right. Let's assume that you have an audience of policyholders right now. I want you to speak to them because, Patrick, sometimes even people who stand to recoup some of their monies are sometimes complacent. And I want you to speak to these people and get them out there en masse on Tuesday. Talk to them.
George, thank you for this opportunity. Again, I think this is a profound moment, and I trust that your broadcast does go far and wide on this occasion. Look, what I would say to the policyholders in the Eastern Caribbean, whether you're members of BAICO or not, is that there is a time in our civilization, in our historical context, and when we have to make a stand. And these occasions have arisen in the past on 3 or 4 occasions in our region's history. We had, of course, emancipation, then we had the end of colonialism, then we had independence. And to my mind, this is one of those defining moments for our Caribbean civilization, when, having regard to the fact that we have lost so much of our assets, of our wealth, in a manner which, to my mind, goes contrary to everything that we would have signed up for and signed on to as a CARICOM community, we need to make a stand. We need to make a stand not only because we want to get the money back. We need to make a stand because we need to send a strong signal that we believe in this construct of a Caribbean civilization that is non-discriminatory and that treats rich and poor, big country and small country, investor and the companies that benefit from the investment in a rules-based system that is all the same. And whether we win this battle or we lose this battle, history must not record us as having stood idly by while so much of our wealth was taken away from us without so much as a fight from us to defend that which in fact is our entitlement. This is such a defining moment to my mind, George, for the OECS. And I know it's been a long time coming. People are becoming frustrated. I started this battle alone in 2009. We're now in 2019. I have spent countless hours trying to find a way with others so that we could carve a path that was legally possible to the possibility of a successful outcome at the CCJ. Many people have been on this battle and this journey with us for 3 or 4 years. A couple of others 5. BAICO is 5 years old. And I know they expected to have results by now. But our scripture tells us that weeping lasts for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And we did not, George, have all the information we needed. We had to scratch, and we had to connive, and we had to use intrigue, and we had to use every known tactic to get at a lot of the information that we now have, which enables us to make a case. And the court will also hear that, because the court will want to know what took us so long. We are very clear. There were very deliberate efforts to ensure that we did not have the information to go to court. And we are able to show that. So to my mind, George, I want to say to them, do not lose faith. The coming year and a half will help to define whether we have a successful outcome or an unsuccessful outcome. I didn't say it will define it. It will help to define it. We need them to be vigilant. We need the OECS civilization to speak loudly to the press on this matter, and there are going to be opportunities to do that, because we need the court to hear that this matter is not a matter only of money. It's a matter which has to do with our whole construct of what a Caribbean civilization, a CARICOM, ought to be, which of course goes way back to the 1930s and 1920s. So George, from our mind, we just want to say to them, stay with us. Do not lose hope. We are working diligently, and we now believe that we have what is necessary to make that case before the court, as they will hear on Tuesday when they come in Grenada, on Wednesday in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, on Thursday in Dominica, on Friday in St. Kitts, and on Saturday in Antigua and Barbuda.
All right, so you're telling these people to continue having hope even after 10 years. You're saying, hey, they may have to wait another year and a half. Am I correct?
My view is that the court will be extremely careful in coming to a decision on this matter. This decision is the most complex decision that the court would have had to face up to this moment. This decision will define the court and the role and the place of community law for a long time to come. And so the court, in setting what would definitely be precedents, will be extremely cautious in making sure that they do that.
Fair enough. All right. Patrick, I can't have you sit here with me and not bring up politics. But before I do, I just want to, nobody wants to see a repeat of this insurance issue. Anywhere along the line, did you see any culpability on the part of the ECCB?
I don't want to point to the ECCB as an institution alone. I want to say, George, that the architecture allowed too many loopholes to exist. The architecture, the prudential requirements, the regulations, that the lack of transparency, the lax reporting, the compliance, that there were too many loopholes which existed in the individual states. And I want to say that in moving towards what we have in the revised Treaty of Basseterre, more in conformity with a monetary union, part of the process is what has been taking place more recently of making sure that we harmonize the way in which we treat with a lot of these things. So I think there's been some progress, but at the time, George, it left a lot to be desired. In fact, when monetary scholars have looked at the way in which this was allowed to happen, for instance, those in the European community, which we've modeled our CARICOM off of, they are just basically appalled that we could have these rights for companies, but not have the architecture to protect investors and consumers in the case of these systemic failures. That's how I want to answer that question. Right. We've gotten better.
Fair enough. Okay. Dr. Antoine, here we go. I have to ask you this. I've been hearing rumors on the ground over the last, must be close to a year now, that you do have an interest in becoming the political leader of the national, he's smiling, playing with his mustache as he thinks, political leader of the National Democratic Congress. Is there any truth to that, sir?
George, the simple answer at this time is no.
And what's the complex answer?
The complex answer is that I have said ad nauseum to thousands of people all over the world that between the time I resigned and 2020 is a period which I'm dedicating totally to making up for some of the lost time with my children. And I'm very, very much in the middle of that. George, I have no regrets, and every day I thank God that I made that decision because I've seen too many colleagues suffer the consequence of this because, George, when they're gone, and my three are likely to be gone next year. Secondly, George, this is not about me. And I want to be very, very, very clear. I am a little comfortable. I suffer from a complex that my mother and father taught me called just enough. I have just enough. And before I step out to do anything, since it's not about me, I have to be spiritually guided by Jesus Christ and my faith that this is what I need to do. I have not sought that guidance, but I have not gotten any missives that guidance has come to me either. So the truth is that until I receive and until I'm ready, this is receive a signal from our Father that this is the move I need to make. At 55 years old, George, I'm not moving. Let me say that I'm concerned, though, about where the country is. I am concerned that clearly you have to be concerned. Everybody who has any interest in our country must be concerned by the lack of a strong opposition party. But Patrick Antoine is not ready. And Patrick Antoine, if he does become ready, will only do so after my children leave the coop and I receive a very clear message from my Lord and Father Jesus Christ without apology.
All right, and that pertains to the political leadership, I'm assuming?
That pertains to the political leadership of the NDC or any party.
Okay. But Patrick, I also happen to know that, having known you over the years, I know that you're very concerned about the state of this country right now in several different ways. Outside of political leadership, would you be willing to throw in your hat and offer some assistance to this country in helping us to turn around, Patrick? We need to turn around this place. People are hurting. And we have become the laughingstock of the world. Yet we're hearing that the country is booming. Huh? Patrick, are there any ways that you may be able to contribute in some way or another to taking us out of the doldrums?
George, I have been at the service of this country for many years, and even now, where we are saddens me, as you know, I am not of the view that all is well. There is too much poverty. I do not believe that we are addressing some fundamental issues that need to be addressed. I believe that when the Citizenship by Investment program does collapse, and it will because the signs are all around us, that we're going to have a tremendously difficult time, and we need to start planning for that now. There are several other things I could say. But let me just say that I am prepared, and I will be playing a role as a public commentator on issues. I cannot offer myself for service for the reasons I told you before. I have committed this to my children this time, but when they leave the coop and so on, who knows, once I get that sign. But between now and then, George, I am here. My talent is available to all. I speak very often to colleagues in the public and private sector and to colleagues in the opposition, very frankly. I don't have the hang-ups and idiosyncrasies, and I refuse to be defined by whether it's the green color or the yellow color. You have to understand this is not new. This has always been my philosophy. And I remember receiving a tongue lashing, because when I was the ambassador in another time, I was found talking for a very long period to two colleagues from the opposition at that time, the NDC, because I like to engage. And there was a view that it sent the wrong signal. I have always been available. This is the only way I know how to live. I believe that is what makes Grenada attractive to me and me attractive to Grenada. I just don't have time for it. So, George, I'm available for public commentary. I will be writing. I will be making my comments and my presence felt and sharing my intellect and my experience as a concerned citizen. I'm going to be applauding the things that need to be applauded, and I'm going to be speaking out against the things that need to be called out. And that is really what you can expect from me, at least for the next year. And then we will see, what God has in store for me. And George, I told a colleague this morning, you know, so many of my friends are not with us, George. And people say it, but you have to understand, this year, our Jesus Christ got my attention. My father died in February, which is well known. What is less well known is that my mother's sister died in April. And even less well known is that my father's sister, we only buried on Friday. George, outside of one more aunt, that means that I am the oldest member of my family now. And my aunt, of course, is in her 80s. So this does give you a profound sense of responsibility, George, where you wake up in a year and your whole context is redefined. And all of this is saying to me, George, that we need to place more emphasis on God and on doing the right thing. Not when we're 70-something or 80-something, but we need to do it now, all of us.
Fair enough. Okay, Patrick, so you're saying you're a changed person.
George, I would say that God's been working on me for a while, and this year he got my attention.
Okay.
I would say that I want to be a better father, I want to be a better son, I want to be a better citizen. You know, it's not about where you've come from, it's about where you're going, and you know, you may feel, well, you know, you're not so bad, but God has a perfect plan for us.
Okay.
And I want to be one of those who can fulfill that plan.
Finally, Patrick, finally, you said something a moment ago which sort of piqued my interest. You were suggesting that the Citizenship by Investment program, its demise may be imminent. What makes you say that, Patrick?
George, even though things have improved a little bit, there are too many instances where the proper due diligence isn't carried out, and I'm not just talking about Grenada. We have a way of taking comments out of context. I want to be very, very clear publicly, is that I'm not just talking about Grenada. In fact, I think Grenada has made some efforts in putting some systems in place, but I think mistakes were made in the past. But there are countries such as those I will not name in the Eastern Caribbean where there are problems. And the European community, the Canadian government, the United States government, and other states, including Georgia, other CARICOM states, are concerned that someone who carries your passport, for whom the due diligence process may have been less than thorough, could essentially be a guest or a visitor, or as it were, a resident, or a beneficiary of rights under the treaty. And they don't know who they are. And I think that that's something that we need to be concerned about. In any event, George, I'm not sure that that was ever going to be a sustainable model for development. And I think we need to be thankful for the years that it operated and for the funds and the investment and the activity it brought. But that too will pass, George. And then we're going to be left with the fundamentals. And the fundamentals, to my mind, George, don't look so pretty. When I look at what we're doing with maths and sciences and our performance in exams, and when I look at the motivation that we're giving to our teachers to go the extra mile, and when I look at what's happening with poverty, when I look at what's happening with agriculture, when I look at what's happening with manufacturing, when I look at what's happening, George, with so many people who essentially have fallen between the cracks, it doesn't look so good. And, you know, I say so as a concerned Grenadian and as a concerned man of the soil. There's too much poverty, and we need to try to find a way to deal with that. So the Citizens by Investment program will go because the external pressures on it, because it's now become, as it were, an issue that many countries are concerned with on security grounds, to my mind makes it untenable and unsustainable. And we need to plan beyond that.
So notwithstanding the lack of proper due diligence, are you at all concerned about the apparent malfeasance on the part of some of these governments here in the Caribbean?
That's a big question. I like to keep my comments to countries where I have intimate knowledge of. I am concerned that we have countries which like other countries, where the governments tend to overreach. I want to put it that way. I'm not being diplomatic, but I have to be very careful, because anything I say publicly, I'm prepared to stand behind. There's overreach on the part of governments, and that worries me. I'm making the point on overreach in the context of the Citizenship by Investment Program too, where oftentimes the governments reach in to the architecture of the institutions and essentially subvert the systems. And that is part of the problem that we have when we see people not having the proper screening process and the proper due diligence processes applied. So yes, George, I'm concerned with the overreach of governments, and I'm concerned that we have institutions in our region which, whether by design or by their very operations, the operationalization of them, are too weak to, as it were, fend off the overreach of governments. I hope I'm clear.
You said you're not being diplomatic, but you certainly were diplomatic. Patrick, hey, thanks again. I've always enjoyed our little tete-a-tetes, and I do appreciate it. But it would be nice to see you again in person. I want to shake your hand.
George, I am going to be with you the next time, and I will bring the coffee. I haven't forgotten that. Once you promise that you will have the guavas, etc., outside to greet me as I mount the steps.
Yes, Patrick. Yes, Patrick. Thank you so much, friend. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. And folks, there he goes, Dr. Patrick Antoine. Now, I'll tell you what, this is going to bring us to the end of what has been a topsy-turvy Sunday morning. But better late than never. You still get to hear everything that Patrick said, and guess what? I'm also going to run this on tomorrow morning's edition of Good Day Grenada, 9 o'clock, right here on Grenada Broadcast. But as always, let's say goodbye with a parting word from the Holy Scriptures. And today's reading comes to you from the book of Galatians. And it's Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, which says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Galatians chapter 6, 9 and 10. Pilgrims, thanks a lot for tolerating all the inconveniences and for being loyal friends of us here at Grenada Broadcast. Thank you so much to Samantha Dixon for joining us this morning. Also to Brian Pitt, who didn't know he was going to be back on this morning, but Brian was with us this morning. And of course, a huge thank you to Dr. Patrick Antoine. My dear friends, God bless you, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9.